Hey, thanks for joining. Today we're digging into a really powerful idea, one that has literally built nations, the developmental state. So the big question is this some old school model from the industrial age? Or could it actually be the blueprint for growth in our new, super connected informational world? Let's get into it.
It all really kicks off with this one huge puzzle that's kept economists busy for decades. How on earth did countries like South Korea and Taiwan go from being poor agricultural societies to industrial giants in like a single generation? Seriously, what was their secret sauce? And the answer, for a lot of people, boils down to this concept right here. Look, a developmental state isn't about letting the free market run wild, but it's not about total state control either. Think of it as a strategic partnership, a government that's in the driver's seat, actively steering the economy, pointing investment where it needs to go, and getting the private sector on board with one common goal: rapid, targeted growth. To really get this, we've got to look at the OGs, the original success stories, the East Asian tigers. Their incredible rise, it wasn't an accident. No way. It was engineered. And what's so fascinating is when you put them side by side with other regions, like on this slide. In East Asia, you had states dealing with pretty weak trade unions. Meanwhile, in Latin America, governments were often boxed in by really powerful ones. East Asia pushed through land reforms that just shattered the power of the old elites, while in Latin America, those same elites were still running the show. And all of this gave the East Asian states the room, the freedom, to play the long game on growth, instead of getting bogged down by short-term populist demands. So how'd they do it? Well, they had some serious tools in their toolbox. They controlled the banks, which meant they could channel money into building new factories, instead of, say, pointless real estate speculation. They got the whole nation fired up about a shared mission of growth, and they kept both labor and big business focused on that one single productive goal. This quote from Jenkins just nails it. The secret wasn't choosing the market or the state. It was about having a state that was strong enough and smart enough to direct the market, to point all that investment and energy exactly where it was needed most to build up the nation. Okay, so if this blueprint works so well, could you just copy it somewhere else? Naturally, people started looking at the African continent. But the problem was, this was a whole new game on a completely different map. The East Asian model was built on a very specific foundation: a shared culture, a history of strong central governments, and a powerful sense of national identity. But the reality in so many African nations was the total opposite: incredible cultural diversity, states that were weakened by the legacy of colonialism, and borders that often made no sense with traditional structures. A simple copy and paste job? It was just never ever going to work. So thinkers like George Key came up with an alternative. They imagined an African developmental state that was democratic at its very core. The goal wouldn't just be growth for its own sake, but development that was centered on people. Yeah, you'd still need a capable state and a plan for industrialization, but it would all happen within a democratic system that serves everyone, not just some authoritarian elite. But hold on, there's another huge wrench in the works. The entire world economy has changed since the days of the Asian tigers. I mean, the whole game has been completely turned on its head. The classic developmental state playbook, right? It was written for a world of factories, a world where you built a nation's wealth in steel mills and on car assembly lines. The road to getting rich was paved with manufacturing. But that is so not our world anymore. Today, the real money, the real value, it's not just in making physical stuff. It's in managing information, finance, media, technology. Growth today is built on digital networks. And this is what the theorist Manuel Castells calls informational capitalism. It's a massive seismic shift. The hotspots of the economy are now things like banking, software, and telecom, all things that are plugged into these huge global networks. And as Peter Evans points out here, this changes literally everything. That old strategy, build a bunch of factories, create millions of jobs, and boom, you have a middle class, it just doesn't work like it used to. I mean, even in a manufacturing powerhouse like China, factory jobs started to decline after the mid-90s. So if that's the case, what's the new playbook for a developmental state? Well, Evans argues it has to be about one thing: investing in people. The focus has to pivot to massively upgrading education, healthcare, and the skills of your citizens, developing the human capabilities you need to compete in a world run on knowledge. Which brings us to a really fascinating and, let's be honest, really complex modern test case: South Africa.
A country that is trying, right now, to build a developmental state in this brand new global landscape. The ambition is right there in black and white. The country's official plan, the National Development Plan, makes building a capable and developmental state a central goal. They get it. They know they need to build up their people's capabilities and that future jobs are mostly going to come from services. But, having a plan is one thing. Making it happen is something else entirely. And when you look closely at South Africa, well, the critics have a lot to say.
And the critiques, they come from all angles, and they are pretty damning. You've got some saying the economy is still stuck in the past, dominated by mining and energy. Others point to a totally broken, mistrustful relationship between the government and businesses. Then you have the argument that the civil service is more interested in personal gain than public service. And on top of it all, a weak bureaucracy that can't seem to get its policies to work together.
And here's a really sharp criticism from Jeremy Seekings. He says that the government's policies to create high-paying jobs for union workers, the insiders, actually ended up killing tons of jobs for less skilled workers, the outsiders. Why? Because their industries just couldn't compete with cheap imports. It basically became a strategy of protecting a few at the expense of the many. All of this brings us to the final, really crucial dilemma that's at the very heart of the South African story. And honestly, it's a dilemma that probably a lot of developing nations are facing right now.
And this is the point, this incredible contrast. On one side, South Africa has been really successful at building a welfare state. It uses social grants to give a vital lifeline to millions of its poorest citizens, which is a huge achievement. But on the other side, it's struggled to build a developmental state. It hasn't managed to kickstart high growth or create the millions of jobs that it so desperately needs.
And there's the paradox in a nutshell. The country has gotten really good at redistribution through welfare, but it hasn't mastered production through development. It's become skilled at managing poverty instead of creating widespread prosperity.
So that leaves us with this really profound final question. In this new world of ours, this age of informational capitalism and staggering inequality, what should the top priority be? Is it about providing a social safety net, or is it about engineering economic growth? And maybe the most important question of all, is it even possible to do both anymore? Or are countries now being forced to make a truly impossible choice?